menstruation, a word which should have been about normal conversations, because it's a normal biological process that a young girl undergoes. But it has been associated with stigma, barriers, and there's a cloud of don't talk, hush it up, that is associated with it. What we do know is that period has become about a full stop in a girl's life. That is the truth. 1 out of 5 girls drops out of school when she starts her periods. That should not have happened. That should not be happening. And that is the reason why we are trying to normalize that conversation around chumming, periods, or menstruation. We have a very eminent panelist today to talk about it and how can period of pride, ek Swach soch, that we have started along with Whisper can become a part of a campaign and finally lead to inclusion of it in school curriculum. We have with us Dr. Rashmi Sharma, Seema Sapru, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, and Shweta Sharma Kukreja. Thank you so much for your time here, ladies. Seema, what is the present scenario of menstrual hygiene management in schools? And what are the practices that have been initiated for ensuring that there's greater awareness and at the same time increasing hygiene practices in schools?
You see, it depends on schools, and it also depends on what the head of the school, the parents, the ethos of the school, the philosophy of the school is. And, there are schools where there is sex education begins from the very beginning with good touch, bad touch, with, children growing up and in their teenage years, how we tell them about not just periods, we tell them about the hormonal changes, we tell them about physical and emotional changes that happen, with time, with puberty. So what happens is in schools like ours, children know about it, but then there has to be this orientation for parents as well, because there's so much of a taboo attached to menstrual cycle that at home children are told that they can't enter the kitchen.
That is a huge taboo, and it impacts a child psychologically as much as she is going through that physiological change. Shweta, what is the significance of education here? What can education do in ensuring that it becomes a part of that idea that this girl is not untouchable or impure in that phase?
I think the most important part that education will play is to break the taboo, right? It's a biological process. More than half the human population goes through it. And I think education is the most potent tool to mainstream the conversation. And education is the only way we can reach the boys and girls together, reach them at a young enough age. It's a normal biological process. And we just have to accept it for what it is. The most important part is how do we establish access to clean, hygienic solution around it. It's not just sanitary napkins. It's also clean toilets that the girls need access to.
Yes, it is about talking about toilets as well. Clean toilets. Dr. Rashmi Sharma, how important is it to maintain WASH, which is essentially water, sanitation, and hygiene amenities in schools to provide a safe and hygienic environment to the girls?
True, that's very important. Indeed, it's a very, one of the most important things which we need to take care in the schools, and it is irrespective of the gender. And yet, all the more important if we are talking about MHM or we are talking about adolescent girls. So, if we talk about WASH component, you see there is a composite school grant which is being given to all the schools. And under that, 10% of that fund is essentially earmarked for WASH activities. And if you're talking about menstruation, those days, particularly for girls, that they're comfortable coming to school, of course, it is of utmost importance that, the toilets are clean, the toilets are functional, and there is adequate running water, which is happening there.
And then it comes to again on ground what is happening. And to get that perspective, Dr. Banerjee is with us. When you go about educating girls and their parents, what kind of resistance do you face? And how do you really overcome those challenges?
That in our experience, not just in NGO experience, but working, let's say, large scale with government schools, we find that where there is a possibility of talking on any matter more easily, it's much easier to introduce these things. Where there is a atmosphere of trust among the people who are talking to each other, among children themselves, then it's much easier to talk about, things that often at home are difficult to talk about. I want to give you an example. For example, we work in UP, Bihar, and in Jharkhand in what are these residential hostels called the Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya. About 100 girls live together. That's a great place to actually not just encourage a whole range of conversations around health, around gender, and so on, because these girls come from villages and other communities where if they are knowledgeable, not alone, but as a group, they're much more capable of then initiating and sustaining conversations of this type with others.
Shweta, I'm going to come to you. What are the bottlenecks and barriers regarding menstrual hygiene management, and how do both genders need to be sensitized? Because it is important for young boys and men to know about it, and so that the conversation becomes normal.
The inability to talk about menstruation stems from an inability to talk about the range of topics. How our bodies are developing, and menstruation is honestly a part of it. And because it's considered taboo, because it's not spoken about, the girls don't get the confidence to be able to accept it as a natural process. And unfortunately, the boys are left curious, which leads to more elbow poking and fun making, which makes the girls even less confident. So unless we mainstream it, we are just compounding the gap both in understanding and the ability to talk about it as normal, right? I mean, I'm thirsty, I need to drink water, I'm chumming and I need to use the restroom. What will it take us to get there?
Yes. So if you're having your periods, you're chumming, so you can talk about it. And perhaps even with boys who are in schools, there has to be that degree of confidence also, because the entire cloud that is there or around this conversation is a matter of concern. And that is the reason why Seema Sapru, when we say how do you normalize it, for normalizing that, you have to make this part of curriculum, school curriculum, and then only greater sensitization and understanding of these topics can develop.
So what happens is, children, especially how we notice these things is when they reach classes 6 or 7, you realize that swimming classes for girls stop completely. So they stop swimming, they stop going for their, physical activities. And the only excuse is, ma'am, I have a stomach ache, ma'am, I'm not feeling too good, ma'am, monthly thing. So what? It is not a disease. Everyone gets it. So you have to tell them very, very clearly that this is a natural process. So children, you're not sick today. Your mother's getting it, your parents are getting it, your teacher's getting it, everybody's getting it. There's nothing wrong with it. Then after that, of course, you have to make sure that the washrooms are absolutely clean. Apart from that, what we do is we have a separate session and we have a questionnaire for girls about their body parts and about changes in them, for physical and emotional changes in them. So we have a questionnaire. We give it to the girls separately. We give it to the boys separately. And after they finish their questionnaire, then we make them sit together, boys and girls together. And then we explain a lot of things to them. Once we know as to what are the questions in their minds and what are these children thinking about, because there are physical, emotional, mental changes happening in these children, and which is very, very natural.
Yes, and I would say that this is also an opportunity for multiple state governments and also the government at the center to look at almost like a return on investment. If there is a healthy environment around a young girl when she is growing up, when she has had her first period and she is able to manage it, that will make a lot of difference. Dr. Rashmi Sharma, your response on this?
I mean, it is a matter of honor that even in our budget announcements, we had invested or kept aside, and especially with reference to the IEC relating to MHM and awareness and attitudinal changes in the girls of adolescent age. So by doing so, that kind of investment and the investment which happens in providing free kits of sanitary napkins to the girls. Yes, indeed, we would be taking care of universal education. We would be taking care of health and hygiene of girls. We would be taking care of gender equality. We would be taking care of combating some of the deadly diseases. So when we talk of IEC, I would also like to point out that there are particular days which are happening in the schools as guidance for this and talking about issues so that there is behavioral change, and girls are very very comfortably talking about issues like these.
Yes, it's about let's discuss periods. I would ask all the panelists to stay with us because we are slipping into a short break. This is our big focus. Let's not forget, this is the campaign that we have, Period of Pride, Ek Swach Soch. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this rather interesting conversation that I'm having with eminent people who are working in this area. How can period education be normalized? And above all, can this be seen as an opportunity for one and all, for governments, for various stakeholders to make this about giving a conducive environment to young girls when they actually reach that stage of starting their periods? Seema Sapru, there is visible lack of formal education on menstruation in schools. What can schools do? What kind of education should be given in terms of clear-cut points that school administration can follow?
You see, what happens in biology classes is children learn about the science of the menstruation cycle. But what we are doing as of now is our counselors, along with some children, we're making a graphic novel. So in that graphic novel, we're talking about more of the emotional aspect of it. And I'll just give you an example. Parents are so very concerned about their children during this time that one of the parents insisted that the child wore her boxers at the time when she had periods. So, and the poor child would soil her pants because she wouldn't know, because the parents hadn't taught her how to use, her sanitary napkin. And she would soil her clothes, and then she went to our school counselors. So one of them actually, explained everything to her as to how to do that. And there are some children who don't drink water the entire day during their periods because they feel very, very shy to go to the washroom. So these things happen, and I'm sure these have very psychological ramifications on these children. It's a sad thing to happen to these children.
Yes, absolutely. That is one story. Shweta, what about your own experience? How do you spread that information or knowledge, or I would say just preparing the young girls so that they first stop dropping, just missing schools, I would say, and then finally will not drop out of school?
See, India is a land of contradictions, right? We have parts of the country which celebrate when a girl child gets her first period. But then we still don't want to talk about it. What does it truly mean? What are the physical changes, emotional changes, and some very logistical changes that the child needs to know? I think I myself, when I was a young girl, there was a period of hit and trial, even though I went to a relatively good informed school and I had a well-meaning mother. Even though I think I have a very progressive father, but this wasn't a topic he would be comfortable talking to his girl child. I think for me, the first change was I was very clear that I want to be able to have that conversation with my own children, irrespective of their gender. I shared about it with my son when he turned 10. In the spirit of, this is something you need to know. It happens to your mother. It will happen to your younger sister. It will happen to your friends. And honestly, I was coming from a place of concern that if he hears it from any other source than me or school, it will be misinformation, it will be ridicule. Again, right, you have to, they're still young. Are they ready to receive and process this information is where it's not just schools again. I think it's that larger societal conversation. What role can schools play, teachers play, parents play? And the surround sound of both accepting and supporting the conversation is what we need.
Yes, and that is what we are trying to do. And Let's now hear how Whisper's menstrual hygiene management education is impacting girls in schools and giving them wings to fly.
This Whisper Menstrual Hygiene School Education Program is being run by Procter & Gamble in our school for the last around 14 years. And I am in this school for the last 11 years and I'm handling this program. Whenever the representatives of Procter & Gamble, they come to our school, I make sure that students of 6th and 7th class, they are sitting. So they are a bit hesitant also, and they are nervous also that what's going on over there. So when these representatives, they come to our school, they show them movie about menstrual hygiene and what all changes are taking place in our body and what should be done. So these girls, they become at ease. And in the beginning, when we ask them, are you having some periods, this type of thing, like periods, you know, these days students of even 5th class, they start getting periods. So when we ask these students of 6th, they are a bit hesitant to answer the question, but after the session or in between, they feel confident enough and they tell how many of them are having periods and what all other problems they are facing. So we tackle their problems very carefully, and I'm really thankful to the team of this Procter and Gamble, how they make these girls at ease and they just give them wings to fly. And they show them how to use these sanitary pads in a proper way and even their disposal. They come to our schools, they give free sanitary pads to all these girls. I personally feel that this menstrual health education program, it should be in the curriculum of the students so that all the boys and girls, they come to know about this, and there is nothing to be ashamed of or feel shy about it. And professionals, they should prepare this program in such a way and in simple language so that everyone can understand, and so that there is they give them confidence to go about it.
Dr. Rashmi Sharma, share your own experience in terms of how are the conversations or perception at large changing on ground with regards to periods?
Yes, and I think in general, even in our society, even you would have witnessed that there is a certain comfort level which is coming for all of us. If we see in our own households, the way our daughters would be speaking about or talking about a sanitary napkin, they are like the comfort level has increased much more. So I also think that in the media, the coverage which is happening in this direction, and also even in our certain movies, and I think one of your brand ambassadors is also she's played a particularly important part. So of course it happens when everybody is talking about issues like these and with so much of ease, and because it is not a taboo. Talking about menstruation is not a taboo. Talking about menstrual hygiene is not taboo anymore, and we should understand, and we should help the girls come out of this barrier. So I may also share with you that there have been programs and there have been documentation in this regard. We have sort of inserted a few chapters in the modules which we are sharing in the certain groups. There are groups in the schools, like there is a Gargi Munch which caters to girls. There is a Raju Munch which caters to boys. Of course, there is an interaction between them, both the groups, so that boys and girls can interact on the issue with ease. And it is not a girl issue or a boy issue or likewise. And also there are forums where there is an interaction between teachers and the children. So these are about smaller, I would say, interventions with reference to schools. So I'm sure and I'm very, very hopeful that there is a change, and there soon shall be, a change which is more visible.
Rukmini Banerjee, different states across India have different customs when it comes to menstruation. How will this diverse India or massive India or different parts of India come together to accept a menstruation hygiene management curriculum?
So I think there is, what we call intended curriculum and practiced curriculum. We have a lot of things in our books which you do kind of a checkbox kind of an idea, and then there are things that you actually implement. So I think that if you think about a move which goes from rote learning and exam taking to actually doing projects together or doing things in groups, a lot of what may be in a curriculum will actually become real. We have a lot of experience with working with children's groups. And I think we don't do enough of that in our schools, where older girls and younger girls often never do anything together in school. We don't have mixed groups of kids. So I would say that if we are thinking about introducing things in the curriculum, it should not just be things that are in the materials or things that are in the books. There need to be projects, there need to be some connections to our everyday life. And in that, again, I would say that if you include, if you're collecting songs, for example, in your village, you're collecting music and you're collecting practices around lots of other things. That actually creates more conversation. It creates an understanding of each other's behaviors. And I think in experiments like that, difficult things can come in once you've done with things which are much easier, because you have a habit then of bringing things together for discussion.
Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, last question to you. You have collaborated with Whisper for the initiative Mobile Shala. Can you tell us something about it in terms of how it is really bringing about change on ground, particularly when, because of the pandemic, the schools were shut?
So I think that it was a great attempt to really provide resources very easily accessible to anyone, but particularly to girls. And that they have access to resources often in forms, whether it's been in videos or in games or other things that you may not have access to otherwise. And I think that over a period of time, the content repository has grown. And given the disruptions and the discontinuities that have been faced by everyone, but maybe more faced by adolescent girls, I think these kinds of easily available resources play a very big role. But I just want to go back to the adolescent girl point, if I may, for a minute. I really worry about girls who've reached up to 9th and 10th. I think the closer you are to 10th, the more likely it is going to be that everybody helps you to at least go through the 10th exam. But if you're in 7th and 8th and not very good in studies, then the chances that people will say, ghar mein madad kar do, is higher. And therefore, everyone's eyes should be on the girls who are, reaching to the end of the upper primary stage, who particularly before the pandemic may have been a little weak in studies, to give them extra special effort. And I think the Mobile Shala was a very good attempt in that direction.
Thank you all for joining us in this initiative and sharing your thoughts. That is our aim, to normalize this conversation around periods and to ensure that it comes out of that cloud or shadow of how it is seen as a stigma, or that larger fear under which young girls live in when they get their first periods. We at CNN News 18 and the entire network believe that Period of Pride Swach Soch is an initiative which is about including period as a period in school curriculum. We are hoping that it will lead to change and impact young girls and their parents and the larger ecosystem around them on ground. Thanks for watching.